The PS4 has had a hell of a run. Coming out in November of 2013, it has dominated the video game landscape over the past 7 years. Starting with the botched release of the Xbox One, and then the release of exclusive after exclusive after exclusive, it's hard to argue that the PS4 hasn't completely won this console generation. So, with its successor, naturally the PlayStation 5, on its way out, I thought we would look back at what the PS4 had to offer. So this is the top 10 PlayStation 4 games of all time.
These entries are ranked according to their Metacritic score. This is not a list of my personal favorites or PlayStation exclusives or anything like that. It is a subjective list of the highest ranked games. Sort of. You'll see what I mean.
Honorable mention goes to Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition and Journey, which both clocked in at a 92%.
Number 11, Undertale, 92%.
Remember 10 seconds ago when I said that this list was mostly subjective? Well, our honorable mentions had the exact same score as our numbers 8, 9, and 10 ranked games, and thus all had equal rights to these spots on the list. So why did I choose Undertale over the others? Well, because I wanted to, and it's my list and it's my channel, and Undertale's incredible. Also, you see how the title says top 10 and I start the list with number 11? I can't count, so just deal with it. Will I change the title to reflect the actual amount? No, I won't. Undertale's the spiritual successor to my favorite game of all time, Earthbound. Undertale retains the humor, cartoony art style, a lot of the gameplay elements, and even the sinister undertones that Earthbound has. Where Undertale has Earthbound beat, though, is in its crazy setting and its innovative combat mechanics. Earthbound played like any other RPG you've ever played in your life. Undertale takes the setup of a traditional turn-based JRPG, but it flips it on its head with little skill-based mini-games to defeat each boss. But it also encourages you to think outside the box and think of other solutions besides fighting. It's possible to reach the end of the game without killing a single enemy. Undertale also has a deep, rich, and complicated lore and backstory that is still being picked apart to this day. There's a rabid fanbase online trying to answer questions that the game puts out. Who is Gaster? Is Deltarune a sequel, or are they totally separate games? Undertale's a throwback in visuals and gameplay mechanics, but with an active fanbase on Reddit trading fan theories back and forth, that's as modern as video games get.
Number 10, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, 92%.
If value is what you're after in your video games, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is the game for you. HowLongToBeat.com estimates 51.5 hours, and that's if you are sprinting from start to finish. Over 170 hours to see and do everything that's in the game. And that's not even including the Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine expansions, which are not small. Alright, so it's long. But is it any good? Is it any good? Have you seen the name of this list? Did you see the Metacritic score? Of course it's good. I feel like I sounded like the genie there. Did you rub my lamp?
Did you rub my lamp? Did you wake me up? Did you bring me here?
Imagine if Skyrim had the combat system of Dark Souls. This is not a game to borrow off a buddy for a weekend. You're gonna sink weeks of your life into this. It has a pretty high barrier for entry, but once you give it time and you fully dive in, you will not be disappointed. The RPG mechanics are deep, the combat is chunky and satisfying, the characters are memorable and unique, the production values are perfect. I honestly don't even think the story's that great, but the world's so immersive that it just doesn't matter. You can drop in for a play session, not progress the story at all, and have the time of your life. Like, a lot of times, I found side quests and just exploring to be more rewarding than the main quest line. Go find a strategy guide, study up for a week or two before you even turn the game on. Then, go out, buy a copy, say goodbye to your friends, and play this game.
Number 9, Bloodborne, 92%.
Bloodborne means a lot to me because it was my introduction to From Software. They make some of the best games out right now, and I've since played through all the Dark Souls games and Sekiro, but Bloodborne is still my favorite to this day. Bloodborne's filled with grotesque monsters, a creepy horror game vibe with non-horror gameplay, crushing difficulty, but it's never unattainable or unfair. I'll never forget the first time that Yharnam's gates open up and you see this mob of people around a bonfire, and oh my god, it's beautiful and it's awful and it's brutal and I hate it and I love it, and it turns out it's the hardest part of the game, so if you're stuck there, just keep going. What I remember the most about the first playthrough is getting demolished by Father Gascoigne, however you say his name, like 20 or 30 times. I finally beat him, and not only did I get this rush of happy chemicals and adrenaline in my brain, but as soon as he went down, I knew I was not going to stop playing this game until I finished it, and I didn't. If you've been put off by the reputation or the difficulty from FromSoft games, I suggest you go ahead and give it another shot. Start with Bloodborne, that's what I did, and eventually it just clicks. If you're already a fan of these games, stay tuned. I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more of these in my future videos. Like I said, I love this series and everything that FromSoft has put out recently. So, yeah, stick around and I'll be covering them in the future.
Number 8, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, 93%.
What does it say about a franchise when this fourth installment is possibly the least beloved in the series, and yet it's still the 9th best game on what is probably the best console ever released? There wasn't anything inherently wrong with using the rope to swing around and reach new areas. I just didn't really like it. It felt tacked on, and it wasn't really a part of the character or gameplay mechanics from the previous games, and it felt like they just threw it in for the sake of something new. Playing significant periods of time as Nathan as a child? Pass. A secret brother that we never knew about? Pass. A weird melee finale in a third-person shooter? Hard pass. So how does it still manage this position on the list with all these questionable elements? Well, it does everything else perfectly. Bigger set pieces, tighter gunplay, more touching story beats, and a more nuanced story. A significantly improved enemy AI, deeper connection with characters that we did already know and love, and a Crash Bandicoot level? You can't beat that. It's a more subdued and more mature game. It somehow manages to be both more over the top with its action, but also it feels more grounded. It's an incredible achievement to be able to walk that line and do both of those things well, and it does it perfectly. Oh, hold on. I think I'm going to go play Uncharted 4 for a little bit. I'll be right back.
Number 7, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, 93%.
This game is flat out unfinished. There was an additional section planned for this game that couldn't be completed. How many games could you chop off the final third and still call it a masterpiece? Imagine if this video stopped before entries 3, 2, and 1, and it was still considered one of the best YouTube videos ever released. It still manages to be one of the best games on the console, but you can't help but wondering what could have been. If Konami and Kojima could have played nice and figured something out, this very well could be in the conversation for the best video game of all time. Think of games like The Last of Us or Mass Effect or BioShock. They don't have great game mechanics. From a gameplay perspective, they're average or worse, but it's the storyline that holds them up, or the big twist ending or something like that. Metal Gear Solid 5 is the exact opposite. This game has the gameplay, but no satisfying story. So I said it has no story, it has no ending. How could it possibly be here? Well, it plays immaculately. This very well could be the best gameplay on the list, and possibly of all time. If you just sit down with a game and see how it controls for 5 minutes, you're going to have a hard time finding a better experience than Metal Gear Solid 5. There's a million ways to accomplish any task. It rewards out-of-the-box thinking. You have a huge arsenal of weapons and gadgets to use. There's base building elements. And of course, a healthy dose of Hideo Kojima's weirdness stamped all over it. This isn't the Metal Gear Solid that you're used to. The long corridors and confined spaces of MGS 1 and 2 are gone. This is a full-fledged stealth-based open-world game. The only thing it's missing is its...
Number 6, The Last of Us Part 2, 93%.
This is definitely the most divisive game on the list for sure. The Last of Us Part 2 is a critical darling, but a mixed bag with fans. Even I have mixed emotions with it myself. Did I like it? Yeah. from a gameplay and presentation perspective, it improves on every single aspect of the first game. The visuals are incredible, combat is faster and more precise, upgrading items has been streamlined to be simpler and easier to understand and use. The reason The Last of Us was such an incredible game, though, wasn't for its mechanics, it was the story, and that's where the divide comes with fans on the sequel. Killing off a beloved character an hour in, making you play half the game as the antagonist, these aren't going to sit well with everyone, and I'm sure the developers knew that going in. This game was made for you to feel something, and in that, it succeeds. It's gonna sound like a joke, but I'm totally serious. The best part of this game is the options. There are dozens of options for the subtitles alone. How big should they display? What color would you like them? Should different speakers each get their own color? Would you like it to say the name of the person speaking or not? How about an arrow to show what direction the voice is coming from? This is just one example. Almost every aspect of the options are as in-depth as this one example, and it allows you to cater the experience how you like it. If other developers steal anything from The Last of Us Part 2, I think it'll be its accessibility options.
Number 5, Persona 5, and Persona 5 Royal, 94%.
My god, I love this game. It's so bizarre, so unique, and it's just so damn good. In Persona 5, you play as a high school student who must make friends, work a part-time job, study for tests, save the world from the subconscious demons that dwell in the minds of criminals. Yeah, it's as weird as it sounds, but it just works. Unlike some of the other games that could potentially take you 100 plus hours to beat, Persona never gets stale, its story never drags or becomes overburdened, and its characters never lose their charm. In short, the game never wears out its welcome despite its lengthy runtime. What's really impressive is how unique the game manages to feel while simultaneously reminding me of other games. It's a dating sim, it's a life sim, it's Final Fantasy, it's Pokemon, it's Shenmue, but it has the art style of a Japanese anime show. It feels so unique but so comfortable and familiar all at the same time. As a side note, it's probably my favorite game world on the list as well. The world's fantastical and vibrant and absolutely insane, but it follows its real-world inspiration of Tokyo so closely that it manages to feel among the most grounded and real locations that I've ever experienced in a game.
Number 4, God of War, 94%.
Speaking of incredible game worlds, God of War's Midgard is stunning. The original God of War series was incredible and influential and fun and fast-paced, but it was also a product of its time and it was stale. The uber-macho, sex-fueled revenge monster of the earlier games has been toned down and fully revamped. There's three-dimensional characters instead of just Kratos fodder. The world matured and was no longer interested in this hyper-masculine character that the early 2000s Kratos was. At the same time, the video game world moved on and was no longer interested in pressing square, square, triangle over and over again. So, God of War 2018 fixed both of these issues with a more focused, thoughtful narrative, a more relatable, sympathetic, and vulnerable protagonist, and slower, more thoughtful combat that values strategy over button mashing. The original God of War changed action video games for a decade. Every third-person action game was fairly or not labeled a God of War clone in the years after its release. Interesting to see then that this God of War took its biggest step forward by taking cues from another action game that similarly spawned a swarm of copycats, Dark Souls. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that God of War is a Dark Souls clone, not at all. It's so much more than that and so much better than that. But at the same time, you're lying to yourself if you think that this game wasn't inspired by Dark Souls' combat system. Anyway, tangent over, go play this game, go play it right now.
Number 3, The Last of Us Remastered, 95%.
There's nothing I can say about this game that hasn't already been said. The Last of Us is immaculate. The game is the argument for video games as art. This is the horror drama little brother of Uncharted's over-the-top blockbuster action. The gunplay is fun and snappy, AI's good, the upgrades are meaningful and provide a good sense of progression, the minute-to-minute gameplay is fun and breezy, unless you play on the nightmare that is the grounded difficulty level. But if you're playing this game for the gameplay, you're playing it wrong. I mentioned BioShock in a previous entry. BioShock is fine as a first-person shooter, but if you're trying to compare it to Call of Duty or Halo, you're playing the game wrong. That's how The Last of Us is. The combat and exploration are good, not great. But who cares? That's not the star of the show in this game. The characters, plot, and my god, that ending are what elevate this from being a competent shooter to one of the greatest games ever made. It's really incredible to see its scores considering that this is a remaster. They released a game that was over a year old, that was developed on decade-old hardware, and it got almost perfect review scores from every outlet. That tells you how great this game is.
Number 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, 97%.
If you keep watching this channel, you'll come to realize that I'm not much of a multiplayer or online gamer. I like a single-player story game. So, having said that, I don't really know a lot about GTA Online, except that it makes a ridiculous amount of money. So, having said that, I'm basically reviewing and judging this on half a game. It's half the story of GTA 5 and half the online component. But even just judging it as half a game, this totally deserves its spot here. It has a huge story mode with 3 playable characters that all play and act and just are very different from one another. The missions are fun and different, and the 3 stories for each of the characters weave together and create one cohesive story. It brings the maturity and the gravitas from GTA 4, but injects it with the humor from the PS2 era games that 4 was missing. So who cares? One of the greatest games ever, yeah, whatever. It's a Rockstar game, of course I'm gonna say all those things about it. What really sets GTA 5 apart is just the amount of stuff that you can do in this game. There's an entire racing game in here, complete with events, prizes, car mods, police chases. This basically is a PS2 era Need for Speed game inside of GTA. There's also a tennis game, golfing, a flight simulator. You could go alien hunting. You can find Bigfoot. You can scuba dive for buried treasure. There's a flipping stock market in the game that works. There's murders and mysteries in the game world that aren't tied to anything else. You can solve a murder mystery and it doesn't come up as a story mission or isn't tracked anywhere. It's just stuff for you to stumble upon. I bet there's at least 50 hours of non-GTA content in this GTA game. You could play this game for hundreds of hours and still be finding new things. If I was cursed and I was told I could only play one video game for the rest of my life, I would pick GTA 5. It might not be my favorite, but the amount of things you can do and how different those things are from one another, you would never get bored.
Number 1, Red Dead Redemption 2, 97%.
Speaking of massive Rockstar games that allow you to do basically anything you want and also have a rating of 97%, I give you Red Dead Redemption 2. Even if you don't like this game, you can't say it's not deserving of the spot. Rockstar took everything that they learned while making GTA 5, improved it in every way, and applied it to a cowboy setting in the Old West. There's just so much here. The story alone will take you 60 hours. Side quests will take you over 100, and to see and do everything, I hope you don't have a job. There's legendary animals to hunt, there's specific fish to catch for rewards, stores to rob, people to help that you just randomly come across in your travels, there's trading cards to collect, there's hidden missions and storylines like I mentioned in GTA's entry. I would literally set aside blocks of time to play this game and progress through the story, and then 5 hours later I'd find myself sitting around a table having played Texas Hold'em for 5 hours and not moving the story forward at all. Describing this game in a video does not do it justice to the characters and the camaraderie that come through in the game. One of the most memorable moments is a bonfire with your friends. No gameplay, there's not really even any story beats happening. You're just at a party with your buddies around a fire celebrating. You have to experience it, and I guarantee you'll get sucked in. Red Dead Redemption 2 is truly a masterpiece. So that's the list, but what's the takeaway? What do these games have in common, or are there any trends that we see? What I notice is that gameplay doesn't really matter that much, at least not the critics. If someone asks me what the best part of a game is, or the most important part to determine whether or not it's good, I'd obviously say it's the gameplay. Is it fun to play or not? But if you look at the games on this list, it seems like that doesn't really matter all that much, at least not to critics. Of all the games on the list, I'd say Metal Gear Solid 5 for sure, and maybe Bloodborne. The best part about them is the gameplay, but you can't really say that about any of the other ones. The minute-to-minute actual controls and gameplay of something like Red Dead Redemption, there are better shooters out there. There are games that control better, that shooting is more satisfying and more precise. But it's the atmosphere and, like I mentioned, the camaraderie and the presence of the game that come through that other games can't match, and that's what matters at the end of the day. What's the other thing I notice? There's not a multiplayer game on the list. Every one of them is a single-player, story-based game. One more thing. There's one game on this list, and only one, that I haven't actually personally played. Go back and rewatch it. See if you could figure out which one I bluffed my way through. Leave your guess in the comments, and maybe I'll leave the actual answer down there in a couple of weeks, or in a future video, maybe I'll reveal the answer, and it'll be like an ongoing thing. Each video will have some kind of question to answer, and I'll give you the answer in the next one. And that's it. Those were the 11, yes, 11 best PS4 games of all time according to Metacritic. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It'll help me grow. And if I get positive feedback, I'll keep doing this thing. And if not, then I'll just feel sad. Stay tuned for my next video. Should be fun.